All right, welcome everyone. My name is Jabril Ben-Sedrin. You may have seen my emails on maybe too often. We're very happy to have today Ellis as our guest speaker. He'll share with us his experience running Kaizen events. The webinar is hosted by CESA Systems. We are the lean manufacturing equipment and accessories provider to many of you. Just a few points to introduce our speaker. Ellis has worked as an industrial engineer in charge of continuous improvement in Tier 1 and Tier 2 automotive suppliers. He's now a consultant in strategy, operations, and process improvement to several organizations. And he holds degrees in industrial engineering, an MBA, and an MS in operations management. He also teaches at the University of Mississippi. So we're very happy to have you with us today, Ellis. Very briefly, before I pass it on to Ellis, a few words about us. We are a leader in everything lean. What you see on the screen is a series of, or the different product ranges we have, where we have equipped more than 14,000 companies. I know that some of you actually are working in some of the companies that are listed below. It's not just a sample. We provide training games, as well as ergonomic furniture, office furniture for back offices, workshop furniture, including workstations, quality points, computer protection in different types of material, including stainless steel. Logistics includes floor racks, Kanban systems, trolleys, including electrical trolleys, indications, floor markings, signage, Industry 4.0, including digital screens, digital KPI tracking systems, and whiteboards and magnetic whiteboards and the accessories that go with that. So without further ado, I'll pass on to you, Ellis. Thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon to all that have joined. I'm really excited about this opportunity to talk about a topic that I really enjoy engaging with. What it was with former coworkers or clients today from different markets, and it's around Kaizen events and continuous improvement. I'm always focused on how we can get better. Oh, I'm sorry. And so for over the years, the experience has been sort of in those arenas that don't always show up in your main idea of Kaizen events. It's those intangibles. It's the, let me make sure, can Jabril, can you see that okay?
Yes, however, the line is unstable. I think it's probably an issue with GoToWebinar, perhaps because of the additional traffic they're experiencing these days with people moving all their meetings online.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we couldn't hear you very well in.
Okay. How about now?
Now is good. Yes. Okay. Hopefully, I know that at least one of you has experienced the issue. If others are not hearing, please let me know.
Okay, great. Well, if anything comes up and you run into any issues, definitely let me know. But like I was talking about, what I wanted to talk to the group today about is what are those key intangibles that really can set you up to have a successful event. And so I'm going to go through some points here and just kind of briefly talk about, in my opinion, some of those approaches to events that can really set you up for success. And just coming out of the gates here, the first main point really is this idea of transparency and communication. change is something that always, gets the attention of, businesses, operations, and the people that work inside those operations. And so, for me, what I experienced over the years was if we were able to really just be transparent about what we were doing, what the event was all about, what the initiative was all about, what were we trying to improve, and just be honest, and transparent about that, we've, just found that that really had a huge impact on the potential of that event being successful. You could start to, see the momentum start to build when you started talking to people about it, getting them involved early on, even before the actual event started. Especially if you're able to put together a calendar of events that you can see out in the future and you start talking to people about those. And so, that transparency and communication is important. We also talked about, defining what success looks like, whether that was as you were preparing and communicating about that event, starting to talk up front about what potential targets would you be shooting for, whether that was, certain percentage increases, whether that was going to be this vision of a new and improved workspace. Was that going to be maybe a change in some work content, or maybe even some type of major relocation? But defining what that success, so people had an idea and a vision, was something that was always important. And then this other point of, the facilitator and who is leading and guiding that event. Having that right facilitator that is a bridge builder, a connector, a relationship person, someone that is definitely organized, that can put a team together, that can really even help with some of the details. I know many of you probably have been in events where there were lunches, breakfasts, sort of, those type of activities, guest speakers coming in and out, and having a facilitator that can really organize those type of things, make them smooth and seamless, tend to be ways that you can minimize distractions and keep people focused and keep the energy going. So having that facilitator is definitely key. And also for the facilitator, having that right person that can engage with, if you're going to have frontline, personnel involved in the events, which I highly encourage, and the data also says that is key, is having that facilitator that can engage with, frontline associates that are in the trenches, actually being impacted by these initiatives or these events. And so having them, they have the ability to connect with them as well. And so I'm going to just go to the slide here. So let's go to the next slide. Just continue to talk about more of the intangibles. This idea of, collaborating before, during, and after the event. Again, I think this is where having some planning and foresight involved in terms of, hey, what events, what initiatives are we going to be looking to accomplish this year? And let's have a schedule set up for those events. And so if you have that in place, then you can start to actually just have these informal conversations about what's coming up before the events even start. So you're building that momentum, you're getting consensus, you are, engaging people that may not be part of the actual event, getting ideas, soliciting input before and during the event, and then after the event as well. Continue to have that discussion, not in a way that's all consuming, but just making sure that whatever it is that you're focused on in that event continues to stay on the radar. You also want to, again, if you kind of catch the theme I'm talking about here, it's really about engagement. Engaging with people, not necessarily just heads down, getting in the event, coming up with these ideas and trying to force your way, through change. but it's actually trying to be inclusive, trying to socialize these ideas, get buy-in, building that momentum so that when the resources are needed, when the space is needed, everybody's comfortable with what's going on. Now the change, because the change within itself is going to be challenging, why not build that community and build that buy-in before, during, and after the event? And of course, having that senior level support, having senior leadership engaged, whether that's through inviting them to maybe rally the troops in the beginnings, maybe make mention of the initiatives with other senior managers, with other locations, but having them as an advocate and an ally is definitely going to be important. So these are some intangibles that I think give you that momentum that you need. I know in my experience, working in a plant and having the plant manager mention the event at a morning meeting or all employees meeting and sort of lending that support and asking people to make sure they get involved, I think in my experience have been some of the best events and most successful events because we were sort of building up prior to that event starting. All right. So let's make sure I don't skip anything here. Okay. So one of the stats, and Jabril and I were talking about different things around in terms of just key stats to just drive home the point here. And in one of the stats that I picked up, it kind of jumped at me in terms of 30% of participants. Only 30%. Let me just reemphasize that only 30% have taken measures around continuous improvement in the last 12 months. And so that's a huge opportunity missed in terms of improving the business, improving the flow, improving the overall operations, and improving morale. And so I started thinking about this and just trying to reason why. And what stood out to me was in my experience, most of the time events were either canceled, rescheduled, or just tabled all outright because things were just so busy. Activity was high, record production, lots of overtime. People may be stretched too thin, maybe positions have not been filled. So, not having the flexibility to actually lend resources to an event. And so, that really drives, I think a lot of when you see a survey like this and it says that only 30%, because within that 12-month period, could that company or operation business could have been experiencing just record output. And so there's a little reason behind that. But at the same time, as things start to potentially level off and maybe even a slight decline when it comes to manufacturing and business, coming off of record highs, there may be the best opportunity now to look for those opportunities to have these events and start to get people to thinking about, continuous improvement, from that standpoint. And also another stat is, 21% plan to take up the initiative going forward. So again, there is this mindset of, hey, now I'm aware that, the continuous improvement approach will continue to give our business that edge. Let's start to get things in place to take up the initiative going forward, training, and we'll talk about some things in terms of, the return on investment around training, but you can see that there is some ideas and some insight in terms of where manufacturing and where business are looking to move forward. All right. So Jabril, here's do you want to sort of interject here in terms of the polling questions?
Yes. So we have a poll that should appear on your screen in a second. Launch. Okay, so if you take a few seconds to answer this one, and we have another one, I believe, after that.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we have only 4% of, by the way, you're more than 55 participants today.
Great.
So we have 26% voters. Let's try to get to it close to 60% if possible, 60, 70%. All right. So it's clearly right now in favor of yes.
All right. Well,
Yes,
that's great.
90,
That's great.
It's 90% yes.
Okay.
And I believe we can move to the next.
Okay, very good. All right. So again, I wanted to just continue this discussion, and although it may sound somewhat repetitive, I think it's just very critical from a best practice standpoint that that you clearly define these goals and expectations when it comes to objectives around a Kaizen event, because they can easily be misconstrued in terms of, hey, this event is focused on a lack of performance. Maybe it's a labor, an opportunity to reduce labor or headcount. And so if not communicated clearly, there can be this misconception, and you stand to lose a lot of momentum. Most importantly, a lot of fresh ideas that may not be fresh, may have been, in your frontline team's head all along, but they just have not been included or felt like they had an opportunity to speak about what could improve because of, unclear objectives around the business, around the operation. So clearly defining the goals and expectations, there needs to be a tremendous amount of work that goes into, communicating about the event, who's involved, getting that discussion going, allowing that discussion to happen sort of informal before any, major communication, any kind of event charters are put out. I just think, again, that's where I've found the most success, is just going around and talking to people. Hey, we're going to have this event. We'll make sure you're still on board. Hey, let's just kind of do a quick walk around, anything that we may have missed, or hey, anything that we need to look at that's come up here recently. Those are the things that I like to do, so that when I do prepare some communication about the event, it does include some of those ideas and suggestions from people that will be impacted, and so they can say, yeah, I had some input on that, and yes, this is what we are planning to do. And so if you can get people that are impacted speaking in those terms, I think you're well ahead of the game. This idea of around training, you don't want to have an event and try to introduce tools that are Kaizen, continuous improvement, lean related, and people don't understand them. They don't really get it. And so they may not be all the way, in terms of, going out and looking at things a certain way on the shop floor or in the office or in their systems. They're not going to look at them in a consistent way if they don't really understand how to look at these things, from a lean and continuous improvement standpoint. So it's imperative that they be trained and understand those roles during the event. Now, I would, in my experience, trying to train them the first day of the event, or the first couple of days, you're behind, and you're not going to really maximize your time. And we'll talk about sprinting to the finish here in a second, but just trying to identify opportunities for training outside of the event. So again, if you have a calendar of events, maybe in those pockets, or maybe at the beginning of the year or some point, being strategic about having some training around, hey, what's 5S, what's value stream mapping, what's a gimbal walk, what's a process analysis, what's a process map, what's a time study, and then some of the benefits, and kind of giving them some case studies, some concise case studies on organizations that do approach continuous improvement have this type of success. And so finding opportunities to do that training before the event so that you have trained and prepared individuals coming into the event. Again, you get to hit the ground running because number one, you've socialized, you've discussed, you've just made it part of your daily discussion, and then they are trained to see opportunities in the same light that you as a facilitator or as a leader also see. And so just a quick stat here in terms of return on investment. Hey, 8-to-1 is not, that's pretty good. And so it gives, and there are different ways to look at this. There's different ratios. This one just kind of stood out at me. Wasn't the highest one. It wasn't the lowest one. It sort of made sense in terms of, investing in lean definitely results in, savings generated. Because if you've got an entire team that understands the concepts, can effectively use the tools, and can effectively engage, the operation, the return can definitely be pretty significant. And here's kind of where I mentioned earlier about, executing the plan swiftly. Some of the events that I can remember where things just kind of didn't go really well was when I may have been pulled in too many different directions and I did not seize the moment in terms of the action items, the opportunities that were coming by way of that event, and actually executing those swiftly, meaning here's an opportunity, we have a plan for it, let's execute the plan quickly. Don't put it on the shelf, go back to your regular assignment, and then when you get time, try to engage, skilled trades to get carts built, or developers to make changes to a form in the system if it's a business type process. It's stay with it until completion if possible. And so for the events that I was able to stay with it and really engage from the beginning to the end, and then even beyond the event, being swift and taking swift action, I was able to continue to ride that energy, that momentum, and that awareness of the event. And so, for example, if I'm doing a systems implementation as a result, or some changes to the system as a result of the event, then when I contacted that IT developer shortly after the event, it's a pretty good chance they were aware of it because I got that buy-in from their manager. Hey, we're doing this event. This is what we're going to be working on. We may engage some of your people. And so those discussions were already made. They talked about it in their meetings. And so, shortly a couple of days after the event, after everything got organized and sort of set for, continued execution, they were already aware. And so they had, they didn't have to put up a defense mechanism of how busy they were. It was, hey, yeah, I was expecting you guys. Let's figure out what we need to do and go from there. So that's just a good example of, executing the plan swiftly. Don't let these things drag out. Take advantage of that energy that's already there, and just ride that momentum as far as you can until these things get done. So it's it's kind of that, just that, that mentality of, hey, we have a clear plan, we've got great input, let's not lose this momentum, because what that does is that just makes great deposits for that next event. And people really, they get it. You almost build this reputation of, hey, this team gets things done. When they have a Kaizen event, they get things done. And if you can start to build that reputation, it just starts to grow with each event. All right. So just continuing again, this good discussion around, what makes events successful. Because sometimes the event will be a solution that's not as complex in terms of just, rearranging a workspace or rearranging workflow or changing a few inputs on a form to complex as, a new product development process. But again, I think regardless of that, these practices can, I think just are some common approaches to, but just being mindful of these things are, are important to allow events to, to be successful. And again, like I said just a minute ago, hey, don't let things linger. Don't let that action item list go untouched for weeks. Because again, you're back to your regular scheduled activity. If you continue to see that, talk to team members, talk to leadership, talk to your direct supervisor. Hey, I feel like I'm not able to dedicate the right amount of time to these action items to get them done, to follow up, to really engage. Make people aware, because if you don't, then they may just assume that you're getting things done, but then at the moment that they don't see things getting done, they may assume that you're just not effective, and that may not be the case at all. So back to that transparency idea. Hey, if things are slowing down or you get reassigned to a project that takes you away from, focusing on, the things around these events, say something early and often. I would definitely recommend that. I've had that experience, and, sometimes perception is everything. And the perception that, hey, maybe Ellis is not as effective, maybe he's just not focused, it could be a number of different reasons, but if you don't talk about it, people can assume that, they can assume the worst. All right. And again, here we go. A great stat. Over half or up to half of improvements are not fully implemented because maybe some things weren't done ahead of time. Talking to developers about what may be coming, getting some realistic expectations of when things can be completed. You may have had it in your mind, hey, this could get completed a week after the event, but due to the backlog of other requests, it may take 3 weeks. And so if you could sort of set that expectation as you update leadership on, the conclusion of the event, people have more realistic and set expectations versus, hey, this is a week past due or 2 weeks past due. And so, just making sure that that transparency is there, talking to people ahead of time in terms of what type of resources may be needed even beyond the event. So this stat of not being fully implemented could be just, expectations not properly set. And again, I'm all about planning, working in advance. And again, this is the tough part when you may not necessarily be in a role full time focused on continuous improvement in terms of planning events, is where a facilitator comes into play, where they can, put together a process that says, okay, for every event, we're going to do these 5 things prior to the event. It may be things like, again, I go back to scheduled lunches, may go back to guest speakers, audio, visual tools. Hey, do you have enough dry erase markers? Do you have a whiteboard to write on? What are you going to be using? Do you have enough Post-it notes? Different things like that. Are you going to be using some technology to capture this? Are you going to have maybe a co-facilitator that will grab minutes, help schedule breaks and different things like that? Because again, you want people to come in and not have to worry about those things or wonder, hey, when is our next break? Or, when are we going to have lunch? Or lunch is late, and different things like that. Or, hey, I need to leave at this certain time because I have to do this, these 4 things. And so having someone that can gather all that information and know, okay, this person's leaving, so I make sure I give an opportunity for them to speak and share their ideas because they're going to be gone for the afternoon. And so it's very important to have a facilitator, and then does that facilitator have, if needed, have a co-facilitator that can really just make sure things go as planned and go, just kind of running like a well-oiled machine. All right. And Kaizens are meant to be short sprints. beyond, if you're talking about beyond a week that on the particular same issue, now if you can set the expectations and sort of put a team that's built for that type of activity in place, but these are meant to be short sprints. So you may take a big initiative and break it into 5 or 7 different parts and take these short sprints in terms of, hey, this week we're going to focus on this week we're going to focus on this, and then maybe you are interchanging team members to give people fresh perspective, give people a break, maybe give people an opportunity to make sure they stay caught up on their primary responsibilities. And so you want to build in this approach of short sprints so that you can almost create this pressure within yourself or within the team. Hey, let's get things done. Let's make the right decision. Let's not be reckless. Let's not approach this with reckless abandon in terms of just doing things just to get things done, but actually being deliberate and making sure that you're setting up these events where you can you can move through them pretty quick, get good execution, and making sure that you're working on the right things. And again, I believe, and I've experienced it myself, if you are talking about these opportunities early and often, then your events don't have to drag out. If you're training people, they come to the events understanding the lean philosophy, the continuous improvement mindset, then you don't have to spend, tremendous amounts of time in these events, in conference rooms. You can be out getting things done. All right. All right. So, Jabril, we're up for another poll here.
Yes. So how you would rate your organization's Kaizen and continuous improvement activities? You should be seeing the poll on your screen right now. Give you a few seconds till we reach hopefully at least 50% voters. Still at 5%. The answers are confidential, or at least will be kept confidential.
Right, I can't even see them, so they are definitely confidential.
So right now we're at 60%, and half of the voters rate their organization at a somewhat effective level, and then 35% effective. 9% extremely effective, and 7% not effective. So somewhere in between, right? With almost equal, a bit more, somewhat effective.
Okay.
So I guess it's in line with the idea of there is room for either improvement or adding more events, organizing more continuous improvement events.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess this poll is closed, so we should be seeing now your screen again.
Okay, all right. And then there's one more question here.
Right. So the next question is, actually, I don't see it on your screen.
Okay.
I think it's, what do you see as the biggest hurdle, right, to your organization's continuous improvement? All right. So one more question. It's going to feel like a quiz here.
Yep.
Back to school. And here you can select several of them, by the way. It's so still at 13% voters. Seems like the too busy right now is really the main hurdle, and resistance to change is pretty high as well.
Yes, definitely.
But we're getting close to 60%, hopefully a few more voters so we can reach the 2/3. All right. Yeah, so really 58% too busy, 33% resistance to change, and then approximately a third lack of trained experts and limited resources for continuous improvement. So too busy, but like you said, things may change. Hopefully not too much, but yeah. Okay, so the poll is closed.
Okay.
And do you want to continue with you?
Okay.
Do you have additional slides?
Yes. All right. So we're going to continue this discussion, and thanks for your participation. It's definitely great insight, and glad to see that folks are participating in the surveys there. And so let's just continue this discussion. We talk a lot about Kaizen and continuous improvement, and the default setting is typically the shop floor. Because that's where everything started from, and then organizations that are manufacturing based, that's where it starts, and then the culture starts to bleed over into the support part of the business, whether it's the sales portion, the administrative arena, that could be accounting and finance, and then other subsidiaries within the business that could now see opportunities or be challenged to find opportunities to improve, that ultimately result in the business continuing to have success and see the fruit of those improvements as well. And so I like to coin this sort of Kaizen events beyond the shop floor, and some of the experiences that I've had.
If I may, I think the screen stayed stuck on the poll for some reason. It's probably a technical issue. Usually after the poll is closed, we see it again. So I'll change presenter. Hopefully you could see my screen, and maybe I could take it from you, but you can continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Just let me know when you're ready.
All right. Do you see my screen?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So.
And so if you want, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, and you can go ahead and just drop in all the points, and I can talk through them if that's fine.
All right. Thank you.
And so, beyond the shop floor and where, I had some opportunities to work with some great companies, and even now as some clients, to focus on, sort of the business processes. And, as businesses are growing and scaling, processes are becoming more repetitive. And so you definitely want to, and even if processes are, maybe even lower in activity, but very critical to customer satisfaction or our accuracy, there's still this great opportunity for continuous improvement. And so taking the same approach, so the things that I learned working on the shop floor as an industrial engineer and Kaizen leader, to moving into, for this example, kind of the business and sales operations, where a team may be charged with capturing customer requirements and how to communicate that, from the customer to sales to engineering to eventually manufacturing, to build a particular product. It's how do we identify those key processes? How do we identify the waste? Could it be, waiting in terms of a particular piece of software to process some information, and as the amount of information that's now being required for accuracy is growing leaps and bounds every day, every quarter, every year. How do you continue to create that efficiency, and then how do you measure that efficiency when it's not so clear cut as if you were taking a machined part and running it through different tools and fixtures, and being able to kind of distinctively see how do you do this beyond the shop floor in these office environments. And so really just kind of taking that same approach, talking to people about what they do, getting the right people involved, getting the folks that actually process these orders, quotes, at the table and talking about what they do, the different type of customers. And so, just really looking at it from that standpoint, really taking the same approach, but also knowing that you're dealing with different type of work content, different type of inputs and outputs. And so, taking some of the things again from how do you look at certain key processes that can impact the entire operation, and how do you measure those things? And so that's really what I'm kind of emphasizing here. For example, some of the things that we looked at were around invoicing. How to improve accurate invoicing. If you can get the invoice right the first time, maybe that results in quicker payment, faster payment, maybe reduces the amount of past due invoices. Think about things in terms of when you do get the order, if you can reduce the number of days between when you get the order and when you deliver the truck, which a huge content of that would be business processes. How do you then go in and prioritize which business processes you want to look at, and how you can drive efficiency in those would ultimately result in maybe quicker delivery to the customer. And of course, improving on-time delivery was a big one as well. And realizing some of the business processes had the had an impact on on-time delivery. So it wasn't just the turning of the wrenches or the processing of the parts that had the hugest impact, or 100% of the impact on on-time delivery. It was those business processes as well. So going beyond the shop floor just opened up tremendous opportunities if now you start to get both groups working together, saying, hey, if I had this information at this point in time, I could do this, this, and this, and then so forth. If you could tell me how you would like the information presented to you, then I can present it in that way, and maybe it takes less time to understand the information, interpret it, and different things like that. Another area was around product development, and again, looking at things like cycle time, processing time. What is the cycle to new product development? Are all the steps necessary that are currently in play? Looking at different things like that. So these are just some examples of beyond the shop floor, and I'm sure you all are well aware of a host of different metrics and different things like that beyond in processes beyond the shop floor that are ripe for improvements. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, and so as we start to wrap this up and kind of put everything in the context and what we've been talking about, we've been talking about things going on the shop floor in terms of how to really just get the most out of the events, and talking about how that eventually moved into sort of the beyond the shop floor. But there's so many new trends going on today, so many different settings that are not common as the world has become more dispersed, become more global in terms of working together, interacting, doing business together, running full-scale businesses from a dispersed standpoint. You got these new trends that are coming, and I listed some here. But at the same time, there's this opportunity for improvement, and I think some of the same approaches are still relevant. When you think about the service industry is exploded. I mean, that's a majority of how things get transferred. Services get transferred, or goods get transferred through service. Whether it's delivery service, whether it's software as a service. All these different ways you can look at service, but there's this we need to repeat this process again and again in order to generate revenue, take care of customers, and win market share. If that's something that has been clearly identified, hey, we need to do this over and over again, there's going to be opportunities to socialize and talk about how to get better, how to plan for these. Hey, we are seeing, certain things go a certain way. Hey, what if we put together maybe a quick 2-day event and really took a deep dive into some of these things that we're doing around, maybe it's new system integration, maybe it's one thing that I mentioned or wrote a note down was around mergers and acquisitions. You know, private equity marketing, buying companies, combining companies, consolidation. Those are ripe opportunities. And boy, do in those situations, you really need to socialize opportunities to improve, opportunities to take advantage of, you know, this mindset of becoming lean, identifying waste, you know, because what worked well for two separate companies, as you combine them in some manner, one approach may be wasteful and the other may not be. And so you want to be able to have this type of mindset going into those type of activities as well. I mentioned, you know, new processes, you know, things around, you know, putting new visuals in, you know, systems integrations, new business requirements, market changes. All these things can really set the stage for some really good opportunities to improve. But I think some of the things that we're talking about have to be in place. You got to socialize. You got to get people on board, especially, you know, I've been involved in some acquisitions, some distributor type, you know, agreements, distribution agreements where, you know, you're going to be distributing parts that are from another company and you've got people involved and you know, these people have been doing this job for, you know, decades. How do you get them involved early on and talk about this improvement in mindset? And so I think even with new trends, these approaches of relationships and having the right team and a great facilitator can even pay huge dividends when you're talking about, you know, taking hold of these new trends, you know, around processes, systems, and how they are meeting this opportunity to introduce continuous improvement is still important. All right, next slide. And so, Jarrell, I'll pass it on to you, but I just really thank you for the opportunity. Thank all the folks that took time out of their day to join and listen. And I hope that some of the information was very useful and can definitely take it back to your teams and talk about, hey, how do we even improve our process around continuous improvement?
Thank you, Ellis. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you have any questions, we actually are past the time, but you feel free to leave the webinar, of course, anytime. If you wish to stay a bit longer for questions, we'll take some questions. If not, we could also take this offline. For those who are interested, a handout is available. I'm not sure how you see it on your end of the system, but it should be on the webinar dashboard, probably on the right side of your screen. You can download a PDF version of this, and what you will see there is a list of useful tools as well available should you want to either find some tools, accessories for your Kaizen events or for actual implementation. You have also the contact information both on the screen here and in the handout. So I think there is one question regarding the statistics, and just as you mentioned, the return on investment. I've seen, and I guess that's what also the question refers to. And as you mentioned, Ellis, there's a variety of numbers out there, right? Figures.
Right.
So what would you consider as, I mean, in terms of this source, I don't know if you have it handy, the source that you have used, but what would you consider as reputable sources or reasonable sources regarding the returns on investment?
Well, if you go back, I think I mentioned this idea of I take a look at the manufacturing survey quite often every year and times during the year. I think it's on slide 9. But that's really where I have a lot of my information in terms of stats and investments. You know, what are considered reasonable returns on investment. And so I look at the manufacturer's outlook survey for a lot of that, because not only do they provide the survey data, they also provide insight like, you know, investment, you know, and different things like that.
Okay, the manufacturer's outlook survey. right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the another question regarding the role of facilitators in organizing Kaizen events. Could you elaborate a little more about that?
Yeah, a facilitator in again, just looking at some of the experiences that I had, they were typically part of a full-time group. So, you had a CI group, continuous improvement group, or you call them a lean leader. But they would typically they would serve as the facilitator. So they may not be the subject matter expert of that particular area or process, but they understood all the tools, and so they were best suited to facilitate the event. Okay, let's make sure we do this first. Might be a gimbal walk first. It may be, hey, we're going to make sure you have all the tools so when you go out to the shop floor to do observations, and then they may be in most cases they're going to be responsible for the training of the entire organization as a whole as well. So they're going to be responsible for scheduling training outside of those events, and then almost acting as a gatherer of ideas and opportunities from plant management, frontline supervisors. They will be responsible for kind of pooling those ideas and then working with senior leadership on how to prioritize. So for a facilitator, that's sort of their role. They may be just primarily assigned to a continuous improvement group, and then they bring in and help build the team for each event.
All right. Okay, time to wrap up. Thank you so much again, Ellis, and all of you for joining. Hopefully this is useful. And if you have any requests for other topics, feel free to email me, and we'll be sure to host webinars on those topics. So if any of you would be interested in joining as well as a guest speaker, we'd love to have you. So be in touch. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.